I'm joined from Melbourne now by Liberal Senator James Paterson, who's just been banned from China. He's expecting to be off to China for a visit. He and fellow Liberal Andrew Hastie have been banned. This is incredible, James. We spoke to you previously about your visit and about the fact that you've been very critical of China. Well, what sort of a country is it then? What sort of a totalitarian regime is it that it rescinds the visa or the invitation for a politician from another country because you've been critical of their human rights record, among other things?
That's right, Chris. It is surprising and it's disappointing. Andrew Hastie and I accepted an invitation in good faith to visit Beijing later this year because despite the fact that we have been critical at times of the conduct of the Chinese Communist Party, that doesn't mean we're not interested in learning more from the Chinese people and understanding their perspective better and having the opportunity to raise our concerns directly in a respectful dialogue. Unfortunately, we learnt on Friday that, quote, we are not welcome in China at this time.
James, they said that you and Andrew Hastie had to repent. Extraordinary language. Repent from your criticism against China before they'd allow you to visit the country. And I noticed that both you and Andrew Hastie have been out on social media saying you won't be repenting.
Yeah, Chris, I'm an agnostic, so repenting is not really my style, but I'm particularly not going to be repenting at the instruction or command of a foreign authoritarian power.
Have you had conversations with the Prime Minister or the Foreign Minister, Marise Payne, since this ban? Because they must be very concerned that this is inflaming relations with China.
No, I haven't spoken to them directly, but I've been keeping their office informed about the developments so that they're aware of what's been happening.
Well, surely their officers have been giving you advice as to how to handle this situation diplomatically. What have they been telling you and how worried are they about the relationship?
Well, I think they understand that as parliamentarians we've got the right and the responsibility to speak out on these issues. We've got a responsibility to speak out in defence of Australia's national interests and our sovereignty, and unfortunately there have been times in recent years where the Chinese Communist Party have attempted to step upon those. And we've also got a right and a responsibility to speak out about human rights abuses whenever we see them around the world. And you only had to look at the New York Times today to see incredibly disturbing and troubling further revelations about what's happening in Xinjiang province with Uyghur, Turk and other Muslim minority groups. The language from internal Chinese Communist Party documents describing these people is incredibly disturbing and dehumanising. It talks about them as a virus in need of being cured.
Well, it is a totalitarian regime, a communist regime. Minorities are persecuted. People are routinely executed. Dissent is not brokered. It is strategically on the march by reclaiming islands and claiming territory that's in breach of international law. It's playing a tough game of diplomacy in the South Pacific. And I've previously supported you and Andrew Hastie speaking out frankly on these issues, and I would never criticise you for doing that. But you must be worried about just how far you go in making these obvious points, making them robustly and respectfully, and standing up for what you and Australia believes in, but at the same time not wanting to go too far and unnecessarily endangering a relationship that's crucial to this country.
Chris, I'm not at all deterred from speaking out. If anything, this experience has hardened my resolve, and I know Andrew Hastie feels the same way. We can't allow anyone to dictate what an Australian parliamentarian can and cannot say, and we can't allow them to pick and choose from among us those who are sympathetic or unsympathetic to the Chinese Communist Party and grant privileges to some and not to others. That's probably the most disturbing thing about this scenario, Chris. It's not that Andrew and I have missed out on a visit to China. It's that every other parliamentarian looking at this in Australia will be contemplating in the future, should they speak out? Should they share their genuinely held, sincere concerns? Or would it be better and easier just to say nothing?
Are other politicians going on this trip now, and should they perhaps refuse to go now in solidarity with you and Andrew Hastie? Because presumably they are now allowed into China because they're deemed to have an acceptable view of China, to be compliant enough with Beijing's view.
Well, one other politician was invited on the trip. That's the Labor MP Matt Keogh from Western Australia. As far as I'm aware, the Chinese embassy didn't say that they had any trouble with him visiting China, but the organisation that was sponsoring our China Matters has understandably decided not to proceed with it at this time, given that 2 out of the 3 members of Parliament who were invited are not able to go.
All right, it's a worrying situation. We'll keep tabs on that. But do you think that Australian MPs should continue to visit China, or in light of what's happened here?
Well, I think visiting China is a healthy thing to do. It's why I was keen to go myself. But no Australian politician should agree to self-censor or to silence themselves about these issues in order to seek approval of the Chinese Communist Party in order to visit China. That is something no self-respecting democratic parliamentarian could ever agree to.
OK, and just on today's developments, you would have kept a close eye on them. I mentioned earlier we had PLA troops out on the streets of Hong Kong earlier today, cleaning up some of the protest sites. I think we've got those pictures for you here. Here they are. These are People's Liberation Army soldiers. They are mainland Chinese soldiers based in Hong Kong, and under the separate rules there, they are not to get out and get involved in law enforcement and the like. So this is the first time we've seen them out of their barracks doing work, apparently without permission from the Hong Kong Authority, without an invitation from the Hong Kong Authority. Do you look at this and worry that this is a way that Beijing is just trying to get people in Hong Kong used to the presence, or at least perhaps just demonstrate to them the presence of these soldiers in their province?
Chris, from afar, this looks to me like a very carefully choreographed PR exercise. The soldiers were out in casually dressed, not in uniform. They weren't showing weapons, and they were there doing good deeds, sweeping the streets and cleaning up rubbish. I think it's probably designed to desensitise the people of Hong Kong and the world to the idea of Chinese troops roaming freely in Hong Kong. As you rightly point out, it is not the normal practice, not the usual practice for them to do so. And I would hate to see this as an early indicator of much greater presence of the Chinese army in Hong Kong.
Well, thanks for joining us, James. You've got a few more days at home now. That's the bonus of China's attitude towards your trip.
That's true. Thank you, Chris.